Hi there, I'm Katherine Scarrow, and welcome to Shop Talk, a panel discussion hosted by the Globe's Content Studio in partnership with Purolator. This edition is all about B2C e-commerce. I'm joined today by a great group of panelists. Could you guys just introduce yourselves? Maybe we'll start here.
Sure. My name's Aila Morin. I'm the Director of Brand Marketing at Mejuri, which is a direct-to-consumer fine jewelry brand based here in Toronto, but we market and ship globally.
Hey everyone, I'm Hamill. I'm an independent e-commerce consultant and I help online merchants create unique buying experiences.
I'm Lauren Ha. I run Zoocasa.com and we help users online to do all of their research to understand making better decisions about renting, buying, and selling. And then offline, we help them actually move. So selling their homes and buying their new ones.
Hey everyone, I'm Derrick. I'm the CEO of Drop. We are a mobile rewards platform where consumers can link their payment cards and earn points at our over 300 retailers.
I want to kick things off by talking about the state of e-commerce globally, and I'm going to throw some numbers at you, so stick with me. It's expected that e-commerce globally is going to grow to about $5 trillion US by 2020, or 2021, I should say, but 80% of Canadian consumers are now hitting the buy button. But nearly half of all Canadian small businesses and mid-sized businesses either don't have a website or don't have any e-commerce functionality. Does that surprise you?
No, I think it doesn't fully surprise me. I think there's still certain frictions with online shopping that it's still, pretty early days, but then you have companies like Shopify that I think are really helping the everyday mom and pop shop, SMB.
I think for a lot of these businesses too, especially if they are like an existing brick and mortar, maybe they have 5-10 years behind them and they are profitable, they probably don't see this as the kind of growth that they need to sort of meet their needs. So it may not be like top of mind for them. And I think secondary too, if they are used to running like a brick and mortar and doing that sort of face-to-face commerce, they may not consider themselves to be like tech savvy enough to set something up like this. But, as we were saying, like there are platforms now that make this super easy where you can get online in, just a couple of hours and get a MVP store up and start selling your products, or at least just telling people online, like, what services you offer and your location and hours, which is, number one, what people are often looking for when they do visit a, brick and mortar store.
It's an interesting point you brought up. Some companies just don't see the value of it. Like, my business is doing fine, and I'm not necessarily looking to accelerate growth right now. I'm happy. It's a lifestyle, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and, there are some risks too, I think, with being sort of a victim of success. Like, if they sort of have a good business model running and they are making a profit with the staff they have, what do they do if they get 50% more clients? Like, can they handle that? Do they need to hire more people? Maybe it's more work for them. Maybe it is going to be more expensive. So it's sort of like that balance where, if it ends up being a huge success, are they ready for that? Maybe it will, maybe it won't, of course.
Aila, what do you think?
So Mejuri's born online, so that's a whole other discussion.
Right.
But I grew up in a really small town, and I think if you're the only business in a certain category, then you don't have to compete. So if you have the monopoly over that specific category, why go online when you already have the entire customer base at your disposal? And I think there is definitely a barrier in terms of knowledge, because it seems very easy for us. You're online in a few hours, but the knowledge and the skill set and really being able to weaponize that in a way to build a business is not necessarily intuitive.
Right.
And I also think one of the biggest challenges is just how hard it is to compete online these days. Like when you look at 5 years ago, if you were to start a direct-to-consumer brand, much easier. There's this running joke in Silicon Valley where every dollar of VC funding into a consumer brand or consumer product, half of it goes into Facebook ads or Google ads. So I do think a lot of the SMBs and the smaller companies have to compete against many of these other companies that have just much larger marketing budgets that just make it really tough. But at the same time, I do still think that there will be new platforms that are coming out to help some of the smaller players compete with the giants online.
Right. Okay, I want to dig in a little bit to some of the obstacles and barriers that we've talked about that are preventing some of these businesses from moving online, whether it's competition or not. When you encounter a business that may not be ready to make the leap, or if you think about what are some of the things, the biggest challenges, what would you say those may be for a company?
There's essentially no foot traffic on the web, and you need to be ready to actively market yourselves. And I feel like that is something that people might not have that skill set available to them immediately, or they need to hire someone on who can do this for them. But when you put your store online, it's not like you build it and they will come. It's like you build it and no one will see it, because you will be like, a speck of sand on the beach And unless you actually tell people about your products or your brand, like you will not be seen. So that's something I think that is a huge barrier and something people have to be ready to do.
Okay.
And it's a whole new skill set. It doesn't necessarily come naturally. So
Right.
I think that can be the number one barrier, or at least the number one hurdle to becoming successful getting into that space.
You want people to be able to find you online. So the first step is just if someone is looking specifically for your speck of sand, can they search your name and find you?
Right.
Almost just like a business card, right? So someone can find something in your store hours, and then at least you're not stopping people from finding you when they want you, so that because if they're looking for you and they can't find you, they might find your competitor. So at least being there and getting the information that they want, there's a whole nother world that gets into actually marketing to that site and trying to sell anything from it to people that aren't walking by or aren't your traditional channel. And they're two very different undertakings.
What about the small business or mid-sized business owner who's worried about their data online and cyber attacks? Because I mean, whether or not it'll happen to them, it could happen. And that is something that can cause anxiety to a business owner when they're asking for people to provide data about themselves. I know in your case, your business, you asked for credit card information. Can that be a barrier for people moving online? Like, now I'm responsible for this and I have to adequately prepare myself.
Yeah, so I think that is a concern for people, but in many ways, I think it is a bit of a misconception in that, you don't have to roll your own payment processing software to make this work, and you really shouldn't. And you shouldn't write your own security programs because it's
Why not?
it's extraordinarily complicated. It's not something that I could do or would want to do, and there are companies that specialize in this.
I'm picturing Homer Simpson designing his own car. Am I dating myself? Probably, but yes, I'm with you.
Yeah, so I mean, there are companies that have invested years, if not a decade, in building platforms that do exactly this and are very, very secure. I mean, there is a certain amount of trust involved in that, but going with some sort of platform that has a reputation for security and data privacy and like who owns the data that you collect for your store. There's a certain amount of data related to your shoppers.
But what
and who
about
owns
when
that.
Amazon gets hacked or Facebook? I trust
Oh,
those.
then we're
Yeah,
bigger.
Okay. I won't
yeah.
necessarily go there, but I hear you. Trust is involved, but trust has been broken.
Oh yeah. I mean, there is a relatively bad precedent right now, which I think makes people decidedly nervous. Especially with things like you mentioned Facebook, which has been hacked so many times, and like that sort of stains the rest of the tech sphere. So I mean, I understand completely why people would have these concerns.
There's a sense of if they can be hacked and they have all the means to protect themselves, that can be a concern.
Right.
I'm playing devil's advocate.
Oh,
in some
absolutely.
way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
I mean, I suppose the alternative is doing nothing, which is kind of a depressing
but just be
alternative.
smart about it, I guess, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
And work with companies that you trust and have good reputations.
Exactly
I think
right.
those are, important messages.
I think it's also about transparency of what data you're collecting. I think that actually tends to be what gets people. If I know I'm giving you my credit card, my home address, great. If I know you know my dog's name, my relationship status, and everything else about me, I'm going to be uncomfortable with that information. So I think it's also transparency about what exactly you're collecting, and not like an ambiguous description of what might be happening, but literally the points of exactly what data is being seen.
Yeah.
But also, I'd counter that argument with we give our credit cards and information all the time to small businesses who write it down on pieces of paper and like put it in a binder in the back. So as much as it's not a mass breach, I mean, we give out our data pretty freely. I think, it can be really panicking and really scary when you see that it's a large amount of people. But personally, a little anonymity and a few million is more comfortable to me than something on a piece of paper in a small town.
What would be the advice you would give to a business owner who's looking to make that move? What are their options?
I think it's always best to get expert advice as early and quickly as you can. So if you're looking to start online, which I mean is it's all on its own, but you want to go online from pure bricks and mortar, you really need to decide, is this your new strategy? So are you now trying to convert to e-commerce, and who are you trying to compete with, and all of what will come along with that? If you don't know what you're doing, how are you going to hire somebody to do it? So, because in order to hire somebody, you need to create the job description. So you need to know what they should be doing every day. You won't be able to manage somebody that is doing valuable output if you don't know how to value the output that they're doing. So if you go, find an agency, and you're going to pay a lot more, per minute than you would if you had them working in house, but learn about it from them, learn everything that you can, get them in and running this for you. And once it's either proven that the revenue makes sense, so if they can prove that this does work when it's done at the highest level, now you also understand what happens from the start, start to finish, and then you can decide whether to hire it in-house or it's maybe it's not working and you try a different avenue. But I don't understand how you'd be able to hire somebody if you've never started before. So I would absolutely use an agency first.
I'm hearing don't rush into it. Educate yourself, have a plan before you go full
And hire an
tilt.
expert.
And hire
So
an
learn
expert.
hire
Robin.
Hire Robin. Pay a premium to learn quickly.
Okay.
I think also know your skill set. I think, this conversation we're talking about business owners, but what makes their business great is probably a reflection of their skill set. So do you have the most amazing coffee? So would you be great at sourcing and operations? Or do you have not great coffee, but your branding is amazing and you're good at marketing? I think identifying what you're good at and identifying what you're not good at, especially early, is a real talk you have to have with yourself. And then you need to be honest about people you bring on. I think saying, this is what I'm good at, this is what I think you can add, and this is specifically what I need from you, means you can scale a lot faster with base knowledge of everything that you're asking people to do. But arguably, I'd say that in today's landscape, because we're talking about how saturated it is, branding and marketing can be one of the hardest parts to make yourself stand out.
I'm curious, when you're working with clients, if this is something that comes up, like should I hire someone to manage this, or should I be the one to take it on, and what kind of advice you provide?
Well, I think a big part of that is, do they want to do it? Because if they don't want to do it,
They
or
probably don't. Let's assume.
if they find no joy in doing it, then they should probably find someone who does enjoy doing it. Because they probably enjoy running their business. They probably love what they do. Will they love this extension of their business? And I hope they will, but maybe they don't, so they should hire someone to do that. And I think that having someone who is really interested in it means that they have spent time in it and know what they're doing and can do a better job. So, I wouldn't limit people to saying you have to do this yourself, unless they really enjoy it. And I think that that can be something that can really make their job more worthwhile.
Let's just drill into some of the advantages and benefits. I mean, I think Aila, Mejuri is DTC, direct to consumer online. That's how you were born. Why this way of selling?
Yeah. I mean, I think fine jewelry has always been this thing that's really intimidating and scary for everyone. You go into a store, it's behind glass, there's a key, you have to ask, and then you touch it and realize it's $5,000, you have a panic attack and you leave. It's not a comfortable experience, and you never want to do it again.
Right.
So I think when Nora, our CEO and co-founder, came up with the concept for Mejuri, she's a third-generation jeweler. So she'd seen that really traditional mom and pop shop where men would come and buy a piece for an anniversary or an engagement or a wedding. And she was really of the mindset that this is something that could be made modern. So how do we take fine jewelry and remove the occasionality of it and make it something that women can buy for themselves in a way that isn't necessarily linked to a date? And to make it more accessible and repeatable, you obviously have to look at price point. So when you look at retail and that 50% markup on a gold or diamond piece, the price becomes much, much higher. So by going to direct to consumer, essentially we can do the same handcrafting, we use the same factories, we take no pains in our marketing because it's very quick, but our production is very slow, which means we can offer pieces that are exactly the same quality but for a much lower price.
Right.
Which makes it something that you can actually buy frequently as opposed to something that's once a year or once every 5 years even.
I mean, I think the simple answer is scale and targeting. I think scale is obvious. You can reach more people online. I think the targeting piece over time has gotten more refined. So what I mean by that is, when you're not online, there's only so much marketing you can do. You don't really know who you're speaking to per se. But when you're on platforms like Facebook or Google or even Drop, on Drop, you can target people based on their spending behavior. So if you shopped here before, we know you like yoga, then we'll show you this other brand. So I do think it's targeting, and I think targeting as costs on major platforms to market become more expensive, I think that'll be what sets a lot of companies apart. And the only way to really, I think, be good at targeting is to be online.
There's a whole subset industry that's just around the data. So people want to know if somebody's shopping for engagement rings. Well, maybe steps down the line, they'll be shopping for a house and then they'll be looking. So there's this sub industry behind, if we're getting back into that data conversation around people like to know that everybody that is looking to rent an apartment in Toronto and is looking for jewelry, like we know that the last 100 people that had that combination went out and bought a year subscription to yoga. So
Yeah.
it all circles. So that's why I think when people get into data, they start getting, you can get really overwhelmed, and we actually start having a kind of B2B conversation here in that data optimization and trying to understand your consumers. And when we say targeting,
Yeah.
that's all it is they're lumping big groups of people who individually are anonymous but have the patterns to point a direction of where a specific human may go.
I think it's honestly in today's day and age, it's just also credibility and social proof. It's like if I see a store, the first thing I'm going to do is open my phone and on the spot
Where
look
the
it up.
reviews.
And there's nothing, and then I'm like, oh, this store's maybe not legit. I don't know.
Right.
Like it's just that's where the world I think is just going.
Right.
I think.
Really quickly, like what are some obvious mistakes you're seeing businesses make online that should be avoided? Is there anything sort of there's a lot, but pick one.
That's a call out.
I think one.
You don't have to name the business specifically, but
Definitely
just
will not do that. I think one major problem is going in thinking that you can kind of just do make 'em ups and decide to maybe design your store around something that you feel looks good but doesn't adhere to certain e-commerce patterns that people are accustomed to. So, for instance, you would never put your cart button in the footer of your page. That would be a disaster. So that could be one major mistake, is like avoiding conventions of e-commerce sites in general. So people should be able to get to your site, and even if they've never visited you before, they should feel like they understand the complete flow. It should be completely intuitive, and it should be easy.
okay.
I think less is more, and I think that getting a little too fancy, especially in the beginning of your brand journey, is just going to potentially sabotage sales in the long run.
And design mobile first. I can't tell you how many sites I go on your phone and you can't navigate and you can't read it. As you were mentioning earlier, most traffic will be mobile in the next few years, and it's happening really quickly. So if you're not starting your business there, then you're losing a really valuable customer. And don't be scared to fail and iterate. I think the amazing thing about building a website is you have so many data points. You have events for every click. You can see every scroll. So you need to be willing to be critical of your brand and of the way you've built it on a technical level. And you need to be egoless enough to be able to stand back and say, this doesn't work, or this idea that I thought was so genius, I actually need to pivot and do this. Because at the beginning of a brand, if you're not willing to do that, you're never going to grow.
And
That-
the data will tell you.
Yeah.
Like you're saying,
Yeah.
you can
The
see the
numbers don't
clicks,
lie.
you can see the scrolls. It's pretty easy to make decisions online that way.
It's nice to hear that though, because I think there might be this feeling online, like if I do it, like people are going to see me make mistakes and it's going to be there for the world. But the idea is you can change it. It's not permanent.
Yeah, you can also own it. Like I think there's a bit of a stigma. We all think entrepreneurship is this thing where you just create this brand that's valued for millions of dollars and then it becomes a unicorn and you're done. And it's this really glossy experience.
Right.
But the reality is, to get there, as I'm sure any entrepreneur, any member of a team that has grown really quickly can tell you, is there are so many stumbling blocks. Not only when you scale the technology or the brand, but when you scale your team. How do you know you hired the right people? How do you know you're growing in the right way? And what about, if you realize that you've gone the wrong direction and you have to drop everything and pivot? You have to hire people and be someone who's comfortable letting go of that emotionally and being willing to really push through it. And I think consumers are pretty accepting. As long as you are honest and transparent and straightforward, generally people are pretty open to that.
And they might like you a little more.
100%.
Because you're not perfect.
Yeah.
Right?
No brands are. There's no brand legacy you look at that's completely flawless. All you can do is do your absolute best, learn from it, and iterate.
Well, the other nice thing about being online is because you've got access. Like, let's talk North America alone. There's, what are we at, 400 million people? So the mistakes you made with the first few searches and the first few people, like it might be completely different people that come around the next time, right? Whereas if you are only the bricks and mortar on the corner and you make mistakes, you put up something offensive or something happens and everybody's talking about it, it's harder to come back from that. But every day is a new day with new searches and new users. So you can kind of learn and improve by getting the knowledge from your first users.
Right.
So I think know your customers and also be very thoughtful about finding the right channels to reach those customers. So if people are like, oh, and I know we're going to talk about this later, like influencer marketing, oh my God, you only should use influencer marketing if you're reaching a very specific subsect of consumers. And even within influencer marketing, there are different niches of influencers. And I think companies often think they can just throw money at influencer marketing. It's not that easy. Like everything from if it's a post versus a story, the look of the person, when are they posting it, how are they posting it, how many seconds is the post, the messaging, like all of that stuff matters. And I find that a lot of online brands just don't think through a lot of that stuff, and they just throw dollars at these types of channels and just bleed through large, marketing budgets. So I think just be thoughtful about how you market, and then know your customers and understand that may shift over time.
So when it comes to choosing a carrier partner, what are the factors that would go into making this decision? Or what do you recommend to some of the businesses you work with?
I think one of the major factors is choosing a carrier that will actually give you the coverage that supplies to your customer base. So being able to deliver quickly and efficiently to the people who are actually buying from you. And this could be different carriers for different locales. Secondary, I think, is also just offering a variety of carriers, perhaps, that can deliver at appropriate price points for the different locations you're delivering to. And thirdly, I would say just making sure that the carriers you're going to actually integrate with the platform you're using, whether it's Shopify or Magento and whatnot. Most of them will have pretty seamless integrations. There might be differing levels of complexity in actually setting up that integration.
And I think it's always nice to have those in real life relationships with your carriers. If they're a Canadian brand, you can really sit down, talk about the service, talk about your growth, and really build that relationship over time as you scale too.
I think fulfillment is going to be one of the biggest trends in e-commerce, and especially if you are a small store that maybe has more or less a local selling radius, like people buy them within your province or what have you. They probably do so because you can get the product fast, and you can get it delivered within a day or 2 days. And the thing that might be preventing people from buying, in BC is that, well, I don't want to wait a week for this. So if there's some sort of fulfillment network, and I know there are companies that are investing heavily in fulfillment, you can have fulfillment centers that are localized across the country or perhaps, internationally, where now the product is always close to your consumers and they can get it in a day or 2 days, no matter where they live in the world, even though you may be based in Toronto. So I think fulfillment's going to be huge. And there are indications of this already, that it's going to be a huge area for growth.
But that's a bet you'd place money on.
Yes, I definitely.
Okay, you have to play. No, I'm just okay. And what about shipping? So this is a great dilemma. Do you offer free shipping, or if you are charging for shipping, do you have a minimum spend requirement? I don't know if Mejuri, this is something you worry about.
Yeah, so we have a $100 minimum spend requirement because we ship everything with signatures. We are shipping diamonds and gold, so always good to have. And we ship really fast because I don't know about you guys, but when I shop or when I, finally decide I want something, I probably want it for an event that weekend. It's never 3 weeks in advance. My life is never that together. So I'll often get on chat with brands and ask, like, how fast can I get this? How quickly can I get it? And then we're also hyper connected and impatient that once I place my order, I want to know exactly where it is, when it's coming, and when I can pick it up. And especially when you're talking about delivery, say it's coming to your office, you want to know when you need to go out and grab it. How is it going to be delivered? We need all those details because we're such content consumers today that we expect it. It's become the standard.
Now, me returning my necklace, this could have been avoided if I could go into a boutique or a physical location to test out the product. And we talked about this earlier, the move from clicks to bricks, because the direct-to-consumer model works, but now, I want to test out the Casper mattress or what have you. So how important is that trend, and is it going away?
It's a bit of a cliche saying, but as they say, millennials love experiences. I mean, my view is like everyone loves experiences.
Humans like experiences.
Humans love experiences. So as long as humans love experiences, I do think it'll be, will be a trend. And I think a lot of it is that a lot of the investors that are funneling money to these direct-to-consumer brands are seeing that, are seeing the patterns. So they're also all encouraging, their companies to think about offline as well. So I do think it's a movement, but I don't think it means that online is not important or that online is dead. I think it's a complementary experience you should add to the online experience. And I think that, the Caspers of the world in the early days, I think it was a lot of the early adopters who love these products, and now you're going after the mass market, and the mass market often want to try things. So I don't think it'll be a trend that we'll see go away anytime soon.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. I think we're out of time, but I really appreciate you all being with us today to talk about B2C e-commerce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.